Okay. What's your next question? I'll give you the last word on that one.
So I'm curious for your take on Nikki Haley, because I know we've talked a lot about her, and she comes out this week and says that she will vote for Donald Trump. Do you think this is her angling for VP?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because that was going to be my second question. So I guess we will have a 2-for-1 here, and there's so much to talk about. I mean, I honestly don't know where to begin. First of all, to answer your question, I have a better chance, and you have a better chance of being Donald Trump's vice president than Nikki Haley. It is not going to happen. Zero zilch. So let's put that aside. So the question is, why did she do it? Now, you've heard me say before that I think Nikki Haley is a lightweight. I think she cares about her career. She blows with the wind. And this is just another example. She could have done what Mike Pence did, but she didn't even have to do what Mike Pence did. She could have done, frankly, what her voters have done. And that is, if you're someone who claims to represent the people who vote for you, then just say, hey, I'm not saying who I'm going to vote for. You know, I've had my issues with Donald Trump. I think my voters speak for themselves. So it was just a pathetic show of really cowardice and putting ambition over country, over party. And we'll get into the details of what she said in a second. But I'd like to get your thoughts before that.
I mean, I agree. She's always trying to thread the needle. But here's a provocative question for you, Dave. Was she just being practical? I mean, that's the name of our show, is Practically Political. Was it just to say, look, I ran against him. I would have done a much better job. I would have been better for women voters in particular. We wouldn't have these problems with suburban women voters the way we do with Trump. But at the end of the day, I lost, and compared to Joe Biden, Trump's policies win the day for me. So was there a level of pragmatism there? I want to
See, first of
the
all,
second part though is that I do agree with you that she's very much kind of a finger in the wind kind of person. And that's why I agree with you. I think she's doing this to extend her own political shelf life. But at the same time, the base does not like her. So I don't think she's ever going to be president, to be honest.
yeah, and that's so. And let's put aside what she said because we'll address that in a second. But let's look at the strategy for a second, because I think strategically it is such a poor move. I think trying to get inside her head, she was probably thinking, you know what, I've got to just fall in line because after this year, the MAGA crowd is going to be forever, so I need to be with it. But that's where I really don't agree. If I were Nikki Haley, I would have said, which by the way, I thought was her track. You know what? Donald Trump has lost 7 years in a row. And when he loses for the 8th time in a row, I told you so. I was the one who said I was more electable. I was the one who said I was going to beat Biden. So I'm the natural choice for 2028. That's what, for you historians, that's what Ronald Reagan did in 1976, right? He ran against Ford, and then he positioned himself as the alternative 4 years later when Ford lost. And that would have been a very logical thing for Nikki Haley to do. So that's point number one. Point number two is I don't agree that if Trump loses, that Trumpism is going to endure. Cults don't survive the demise of their leaders for very long. And I think and I'm hoping, I can't say when, but I still hope if Trump loses, I think the MAGA cult will split. I think that it'll splinter in different directions. People will go with different candidates. When people realize that Donald Trump is finally done, then you will have a splintering. I think that's the best hope for our country, to get back to a semblance of where we were prior to 2016. But what do you think about the strategy?
Well, I'm not so certain that Trump's going to lose, at least based on where things
Right,
are.
but I'm saying,
I know a lot can
but
happen.
of her strategy.
Yeah, I think she had the same problem that Ron DeSantis, at least what she's doing now, because in the primary, she was providing more of a contrast, and now she's not. So I agree with you. It's sort of like when you try to please everyone, you please nobody. And I think was the same problem of Ron DeSantis, where Ron DeSantis could have been the anybody but Trump, because Trump only had about 30 to 40%, last spring. And DeSantis could have cleaned up and said, well, I'm the Trump alternative. And instead he said, I'm the Trump light and I'm going to try to go after the base. And he ended up not pleasing the base because they're like, why would I go see the tribute band when I can see the original? And so I think that Haley's doing that here, even though during the primary, she ended up outpacing DeSantis because she was offering more of a contrast that DeSantis refused to do. But now she's becoming like DeSantis. So I agree with you strategically. I don't think it made sense either, but we'll see.
Well, and also when you have to remember when DeSantis made his strategic choices, Trump was very unpopular. This was in the beginning of 23, right? So he was still a pariah in many areas of the party. So DeSantis gambled, which was an understandable gamble, that Trump would fade and he would be the second choice. But when Trump became stronger and stronger, obviously DeSantis became irrelevant. Well, not to mention he also was a lousy candidate who ran a bad campaign, who didn't really have anything to any ideas or anything new. But putting that aside, but let's just get to the substance of what Haley said, because I think it's truly galling. If you're going to go after Joe Biden, you're going to give a reason for voting for Donald Trump. Talk about Afghanistan, talk about student loans. But she said literally standing up to our enemies. And I just hope we can all take a pause back and just think about this. Donald Trump coddles dictators. Donald Trump is Putin's puppet. He praises Xi. He called the concentration camps that Xi set up for the Uyghurs a great idea. He said he writes love letters to Kim Jong-un, which makes me nauseated every time I say it. He praises Viktor Orban. The guy is an autocrat and he loves dictators. So if anyone who cares about Ukraine, and the fact that Nikki Haley gave a speech about Ukraine right before she did this, and how important it is to stand up for Ukraine, and then she said she's going to support a man who basically says he's going to end the war in a day and give Putin what he wants. It's just really, really galling. And again, it's just such lies. And I think Nikki Haley has made herself forever irrelevant. She'll be in no man's land. But can you at least address the audacity? And then she talked about capitalism. I mean, here's a guy who's put tariffs, which are taxes on working class people, who ran as a populist but governed as a plutocrat. I'm really stunned. What say you?
Well, Dave, I love you, and we're gonna have to disagree on the foreign policy thing, because I personally think that Trump brought the strength that we didn't see under Biden, and I think that's why it's not just. I'm not.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I'll explain, but first I'm going to tell you that look at multiple polling. In most polling, it's
I don't care about polling. I'm talking about, let's stick with what Nikki Haley said. You're getting off topic.
No. I will get to that.
Address what Nikki Haley said. I don't care about polling. That doesn't matter. That's what people think.
It reinforces what I'm about to say, which is that it's usually double digits. The American people believe that Joe Biden is weaker on foreign policy than Donald Trump. And I'll give you some examples. So you mentioned Putin. Look at the last in the 21st century. Putin has invaded under every president except for Donald Trump. He invaded Georgia under George W. Bush. He invaded Crimea under Obama. He did not invade anywhere under Trump. And now he's.
And why did he do that? Because he was getting everything he wanted under Trump. Trump was going to withdraw from NATO. Trump was going to let him go. He was going to give him what he wanted. He didn't have to.
No,
he didn't have to. That's so blatantly obvious.
The Secretary General of NATO thanked Donald Trump for adding pressure and said NATO is meaningless. It's like a marriage vow. It's like I'm going to go cheat on everyone.
Right.
It's like I'm going to go cheat on everyone.
NATO is meaningless. Okay.
No. I'm saying if you enter NATO saying I'm going to spend 2% of my GDP on defense, and then you don't do it, then it's not meaningful to you. And so that's what
Trump trying to get off in the weeds here. The bottom line is NATO. The number one thing Putin wants is to get rid of NATO. That's what he wakes up every morning wanting. And Donald Trump is going to give him that.
No, not at all. What Trump said was that NATO is meaningless if people do not contribute. If these sovereign countries do not step up and
That's
do their 2%
well,
chartered GDP spend. And so
all
the
right, but we're
GDP,
getting off track. But
no,
in terms of how about
Dave,
China? He's praised President Xi. You know, we again Viktor Orban. You know, Kim Jong
uh,
Un. Are you going to defend his treatment? He said he writes me love letters. He refers to
okay,
him
in
as
China,
Chairman Kim, and
let's look at,
he gave him a lifetime of free propaganda. But because he has the attention span of a 5-year-old, didn't do anything. So now Kim Jong Un has more nuclear weapons than ever. He's on the verge of having a ballistic missile that can reach the West Coast. So great job, Donald.
so on China, well,
No, how about North Korea?
well, you know where North Korea gets their money is from China. North Korea would be nothing if it
Okay,
was.
but can you at least
So,
acknowledge that his North Korea policy was a failure?
I think his policy was more effective on China than Biden's.
I'm
Oh,
asking North Korea. You're not answering the question, which means you agree with
Dave,
me. But
Dave,
let's go to China.
no, Dave, China is North Korea. North Korea is like a vassal state of China. The economy of
But that
North
doesn't
Korea.
matter. North Korea is still much better off after Donald Trump, and frankly, China has been more aggressive than ever. Okay, I mean, Biden has contained China more. It was under Trump that China started being aggressive under in the South China Sea. It was under Trump
That was actually under Obama. It
that
started
China
under
started
Obama.
doing a lot of aggressive things and abandoning their commitment to soft power.
No, that started under Obama. I was in Japan in 2014, and they were already upset about the South China Sea, and that was under Obama. It started under Obama, and
But he
then
got much more
you
aggressive.
keep interrupting me. You keep
Sorry.
interrupting me, my friend. So, what I believe on China, I agree with you. Look, Dave, I'm going to agree with you that Trump should have done more with the Hong Kong protests. He should have. He didn't want to get entangled, but I think he should have. But he also, on the flip side, you mentioned the Uyghurs. Well, guess what? His administration designated the Uyghur suppression as genocide. That was the Trump administration, and that pissed them off significantly. Trump also pushed back against China at the World Health Organization because they were doing all sorts of shady things. He pulled out the US funding as he should have. Should he have done more against China? Yes, I agree with you. Did he do a lot and was he strong? I'm not just the only one saying this. I will say the thing that I think, most proud of for Trump was about the Middle East policy and what he did against Iran by taking out the billions of dollars in funding, which now has been used because Biden put that back in place to sow chaos and death and destruction, because Iran is the one that's been bankrolling Hezbollah. They've been bankrolling the Houthis in Yemen. They've been bankrolling Hamas. So that is thanks to Joe Biden's weakness. That's why the Middle East is on fire. That's why Ukraine is on fire. That's why China is on the move, because Joe Biden is weak. And so I agree completely with Nikki Haley on this.
No, I first of all, as I've said before, I give credit to Trump where it's due. I give him credit for the Abraham Accords, okay, and I do give him credit for taking out Soleimani, just like Biden deserved credit for taking out another elite Republican Guard adversary, and Iran. Trump made the catastrophic mistake. By the way, his biggest mistake was letting Iran out of the nuclear deal, because the man who claims to be such a great negotiator, we'd already given them back their money, and they were complying. And then he said, just because it's Obama, we're pulling out, which again is so silly, because Iran said, great, we already have our money. Now we can go back to building a nuclear bomb. Nice work, Donald. And so, and if you look at China also, again, the amount of just sort of free will that she feels that he could take under Trump, again, because if you tell the world and that you like dictators are going to become more emboldened, Carrie. This is not complicated.
We are in agreement about that, and that's why dictators are emboldened under Biden. They are. That's
No,
Putin felt emboldened because he saw what Biden did in Afghanistan. That's, mark my word, Dave. Go back and look at Biden's polling. It all plummeted after.
I agree. Afghanistan was a fiasco.
That, and you
again,
saw that.
Trump was the one who negotiated the surrender. Trump let 5,000 of the most notorious criminals out of jail. So Afghanistan to me is like the border. It's a problem that Trump created and Biden made it much worse. But
Well, he
on
didn't
that
have
note, wow, what a great show as always. Such good conversation, and it's always done with a smile and affection. I wish we had more time, but at least we agree on a lot of things with Nikki Haley. So I will thank everyone once again for joining Practically Political. It's always so great to have you, and we'll see you next time. I'm Dave Spencer.